when it's so marginal, a player can be offside in one frame and then onside in the other.
That's not clear and obvious either.
No, it's already leaving his foot when the lines are drawn.
It's just that sort of game intelligence he's brought onto his game that I never thought he'd do. It's been brilliant. He sort of plays like that Thomas Muller, maybe, that occupies the space and then pops the ball off. You called him the best winger at the club and he's played 60 minutes in it this year.
It's not my fault, that's Kuhn's fault. Celtic have been crap recently, but did Brendan Rodgers get the reaction he was after? I certainly did. That's 20 minutes. Tim's this week I'm joined by Melly.
Yes.
And Stephen.
What's happening?
And I'm your host, Jamie. Yeah, I mean, there's no other way to call it, Melly. We've been rubbish recently. Brendan Rodgers more or less said the same thing. He has some strong words last week. We go out and played Kilmarnock this week, and that's what everyone was looking for. We were looking for some sort of reaction. Did we get it?
Yeah, I think so. He came out with strong words after the game. He came out with strong words in his press conference and sort of threw down the gauntlet to the players, sent them out there, and they delivered, didn't they? We know this is in this team, but they're not doing it consistently enough, and they went out there, 4 goals in the first half. Kilmarnock scored a sort of fluke, but some of the play was brilliant, up there with the best we've seen this season.
What a response it was for the first at least 25 minutes or so. It was a brilliant performance, really scintillating stuff, and I don't use that word lightly. I really don't. It was really a really exciting display from Celtic. I think everything, the overwhelming sound in there was clicking, just clicking left and right, down the left, everything was falling together. But in a lot of ways, it was about proving Brendan Rodgers and some of the fans, we spoke about it at length last week about how dissatisfying the trickling off of the season was becoming. But I suppose that there really wasn't any way to prove Brendan Rodgers wrong, because playing like that in the first half an hour or whatever it was, if anything, that reinforced, that proved Brendan Rodgers was right. That this performance is in there. We've just not seen it in anywhere near enough of a consistent basis on this quite strange second part of the season. But that's not a criticism. It's just really, it was, as we discussed last week, it was really just about turning this around. And it didn't have to be a permanent thing. We discussed that again. We were saying, look, what we don't want is for this to turn into something that looks as if it's irreparable, and I think Brendan Rodgers said something along the same lines last week about changes were needing made, whether it's players, whether it's manager. We'll maybe get into a little bit of that. What we wanted to see was an instant response, and for at least the first half, I thought we actually got that. It looked like one of those performances that threatened, and I don't know if we're ever going to get it, but it threatened that this is going to be like one of those 10-0 games. Kilmarnock were absolutely overwhelmed in the first half to the point where they just looked as if they wanted out of there. I saw on FOTMob that every single defender was glowing red after it. Now, if the rating goes below 5, I think it is they give them a wee sort of red marking. I've never seen that before from an entire defence. So they just looked as if they wanted out of there. But yeah, a really impressive, if not dispelling of the point that Brendan Rodgers made, then a good response to it at least.
I don't think we're completely out of the woods yet as far as question marks over the player's application and attitude. One game is fine, but that sorry to piss on everyone's chips, but that should have been a title party.
Yeah.
Really, that's what we're all there for. Yeah. And I was so pissy about it. I'm not going, man. They've ruined my weekend. I was so pissed off about it. But you can't deny that there was some really, really good play in the game. Brendan Rodgers, after the game, said, before it, I noticed last week he said, we're coming to maybe a squad lingers about too long and you need to change up the squad or you need to change up the manager. And I thought, hearing those comments, well, he's right. I do kind of feel like this squad has hung about too long. I feel like that's part of the problem. And I feel like we do need a refresh. And I've said it before, I do need a refresh if Brendan Rodgers is going to fulfil his, as close to his dream project as Celtic, that we need to bring in more players for him. I don't want to see the manager changed. I would rather see a squad refresh. I think Brendan deserves that. But he did throw in that, or you change the manager. And then after the game, he went, well, look, I never said anything like that was going to change. I said, look, I'm here for minimum 3 years, and that's what I've always wanted to be. But I did look at that game, and I thought, you have got this in you. And that sort of, I know it's such a negative perspective, but you look at that and go, so you could have done it this whole time. It was there. It wasn't anything structural. It wasn't that Cameron Carter-Vickers was having a bad season and he was bored of Celtic and he was looking towards the end of the season. It's just that he just took the foot off the gas way too much. And there was a few players that I'd sort of thought, yeah, I've got my eye on you, and I see what I'm seeing. But Brendan did also get that performance by bringing about changes. He brought back Greg Taylor, brought in James Forrest, brought in Liam Scales. Greg Taylor got man of the match, and now everyone's talking about Greg Taylor leaving, and God, what we're going to do without him, and people wanting him to stay. Brendan Rodgers talking about, I'm going to try to the last minute to get him staying. And people sort of starting to notice, weirdly, what Greg Taylor brings to a Celtic side, Melly, turning up in midfield, playing left back, playing 6, playing 10. But this has been 20-minute Tim's whole point for a long time.
Yeah, it was a great performance from him. Obviously, it was a big occasion for him on Saturday as well, having his Wayne along. So it was good for him, and the positions he picks up. Like, I think we spoke about it a lot under Ange, Stephen, didn't we? When you mentioned, like your pal said, like, what you meant to do when Greg Taylor's popping up in the number 10 position. How do you do that? And
yeah,
they had a look at it in sports scene as well, where they're seeing Kilmarnock players like pointing at him and they're trying to close down somebody else. And when he moves in there and he's on form, Greg Taylor's brilliant at that, because it allows Celtic a platform to go off of, because the back three sort of stay with Johnston. He moves inside with McGregor. It gives us more passing angles to hit off. And I think with Taylor and IDAH in the team, it means we've got more options in there, more forward passing options. And that's something we've lacked. People moving into positions and being options. It's just a capacity somebody else or move it on. But Greg Taylor's always willing. He's always making runs. And it was sort of unplayable at the weekend. He got man of the match in the stadium. I don't know if it was quite a bit of sentiment behind that, but it was a very good performance. And he's just one of those guys, one of those performances that reminds you that there's a good player there, and I'd rather keep him than not. But we just haven't seen it enough this season.
I've never seen a footballer do that before. Bring your I've heard of bring your baby to work day, but I've never seen a footballer do it before.
He's been inconsistent all season, and all of a sudden he turns it on in front of a baby. Baby's not got a clue about football. Come on, we're paying customers here. That's our woke nonsense in front of a baby. But it was a timely reminder. Well, I suppose you could look at it both ways, and unfortunately timely reminder, if he's 1 foot out the door, as a lot of us believe, of what he was at times capable of at Celtic. And it went to not proving, but it was an exact illustration of the point I made just a couple of weeks ago when we were discussing about how he's basically all but gone now after Brendan Rodgers said something about it in a press conference. I said that if you watched him play under Ange and still think he's a bad footballer, then I can't really argue with that, and I've not really any interest in engaging with that opinion, because I just disagree with it so strongly. I totally take the point that he's been inconsistent. I don't think he's been particularly great this season, but under Ange, performing that role, that specific role that we saw against Kilmarnock, I haven't seen it enough of this season in my opinion, but I think that was like full Greg that we saw against Kilmarnock, and it was really quite impressive, because it's like obviously Derek McInnes is really got mainly one approach, and it's mainly man marking, stick to your men like glue in there, right? So that's number one. And then I saw that Greg Taylor, he drags players in with him, and players aren't going to follow him in all the way to the positions that he takes up, because that's too much of a man marking job. If Greg Taylor sometimes pops up in the sort of inside right channel, players aren't going to follow him all the way over there. So it's a very difficult position to mark against that Greg Taylor takes up. And I thought it was crucial to how Celtic played in that first half. So it is unfortunate that we've not really seen it enough this season, in my opinion. But just watching it, it did reaffirm for me that it's going to be very, very difficult to replace that. And it's not just a case of bringing in a player who's a left back and he can do the exact same thing as Greg Taylor. Now, again, what I would say at this point is that Kieran Tierney is, to all intents and purposes, a significant upgrade on Greg Taylor in almost every way. But it's going to be different, because we've never really seen Kieran Tierney play that type of role. So it might force a complete change to suit more what Kieran Tierney will want to play like. And I'm not against that. I'm just saying what a potentially significant adjustment it could be. Jeffrey Schlupp, I think he's been good, and we've praised him at times, but he doesn't look like a left back to me at all. He's just another
left back I think Greg Taylor's better than already. I'm going to push back on that slightly. Is Kieran Tierney a significant upgrade in every single way? I know Kieran Tierney is an excellent footballer, obviously, and I know he's coming back to Celtic because he wants to, not because he's out of options. I was reading a piece by Steve McGowan, I think, who signalled that Everton offered him a chance, and there was offers from Juventus and lots of huge clubs.
Leverkusen, I think.
Or Leverkusen. Yeah. There was serious options.
Xabi Alonso.
I know there was serious options on the table for Kieran Tierney, so he's obviously a player of significant ability. But can he do what Greg Taylor does? And bringing in Kieran Tierney, does that have to change entirely the way that Celtic play? Because I'd listened to the podcast you did recently, the scouting podcast with Kieran Tierney, which is available on patreon.com/20minutetims.
Not actually with Kieran Tierney.
Not with Kieran Tierney. It was with Alex from The Athletic, and he had a look at Kieran Tierney, and he had a look back into Kieran Tierney's history at Arsenal, and I remember him talking about an interview that Katie did, saying, look, I'm not an inverted fullback. It's all right, I can do it in training. I'm paraphrasing here. But when I get into the game, the quickness of it, the positions you need to pick up, the players around you, I'm not good enough to play that. So he's a different type of player. So yeah, he's a player of significant skill. But if you want to play the way Greg Taylor wants to play, or Greg Taylor is playing, I don't think you can do that with KT.
Probably not. Time will tell on that one, but I'm not sure if Brendan Rodgers comes into Celtic and goes, do you know what, the kind of fullback I want is Greg Taylor. He's came in and Greg Taylor's been playing well for Celtic and sort of stuck with what we're going. I think this might be the sort of evolution that we're moving away from something that he's sort of kept going. It's worked out fine for Celtic and Greg Taylor at the weekend. It kind of felt like the Brendan Rodgers just went, do you know what, I'm just going to go back to the guys that I know can do this. Liam Scales was good for me in the run-in last year. Greg Taylor was good for me in the run-in last year. Maeda saved my bacon. And James Forrest came in and was brilliant. He stuck them four in and said, go and do what you did for me last season. It pretty much was a team from the end of last season, apart from Engels out and O'Reilly in, and went go for that. So I get what you're saying, but I think it will take a change of tactics from Celtic. I do believe Kieran Tierney can play that. Whether it's you'll see the best of him, probably not, but still do think he's a massive upgrade on Taylor.
Of the players you picked out, James Forrest is another one to talk about. It was about this time last season, wasn't it, that James Forrest came back into the team and hit that good form. And everyone, the streak must continue. Oh. We need to get James Forrest on the score sheet before they
scored against St Johnstone.
Oh,
that was terrible.
See, to be honest, when he missed that, I kind of did lose a bit of sympathy for him. I was like, you're not going to get an easier chance against a tap-in against bottom of the league, basically. Like, how are you missing that?
But it will. I hope this is how it turns out, but it's almost like it's written for him to miss that absolute sitter against St Johnstone. And I know a lot was made after about, it's a great save from the keeper who had the game of his life. It was a terrible finish.
It was a terrible
finish.
But
there would be something great about it if that is the massive miss and he just bends one into the top corner or like a volley or something like that. Potentially, like, hopefully even like a cup final.
He's got previous against St Johnstone as well, so maybe this weekend.
Exactly, yeah.
But is he the informed right winger for us right now?
I think he is, yeah. And even though he's only been in the team
60 minutes.
60 minutes.
We're cooling, mate. Thanks for your service, Kuhn. Yang's injured, isn't he?
Yeah,
so it's between Kuhn's recent performances and Forrest's recent performances.
But all going well. Even if Yang was available at the moment, which he isn't, he got that arm injury in the recent game. So even at that, I know that James Forrest, what was it? He hadn't started the game since November, something like that, which is... It was only supposed to be 6 weeks or something he was out for. And I know that he wasn't injured immediately at that, but he has been missing quite a long time. But just on that game, it shows you what James Forrest can provide. His use of the ball, his ability to retain sensible possession in dangerous areas of the pitch without panicking, without giving the ball away, his passing, his link-up play, it's all so valuable. And it's just that it's a cruel twist of football that you can't use him all the time because of his age, because he's getting to that stage where you can't play him in every single game. But if you somehow...
But all that stuff comes with age, doesn't it?
That's what I mean about how it's the cruel irony that all that he is settled into this way of playing that has come with age and experience and maybe been forced to adjust his game somewhat, and it's so useful. It's just you can't play him in every game.
It's saying that if James Forrest had all the sort of attributes he has now, along with being a young winger who could beat a man there's no chance he'd be anywhere near Celtic.
I know exactly what you mean. But at this stage, I think it's so valuable, and it's why he came into the team last season and showed that he was of such great use to the team. So this time around, hopefully he can continue that, because the link-up play, that touch for Alistair Johnston over the top, that we don't have another winger that can do that. No. Maybe Jota on the other side potentially. I think he's got the technical ability to pull that off. The likes of KUHN, Yang, Maeda, you can't see even attempting that first time, just little dink over on the volley, almost like kind of over the top for Johnston to just run in on. We don't see that from any other players, and it's something we've missed. And Forrest deserves his place in the team just now, and I really hope that the streak can continue. But quite aside from that, the most important thing is that he's contributing to the team, and that's exactly what he's doing just now.
I think it was a perfect game for him to come into, wasn't it? It was Kilmarnock at home, they're not very good, and it's a sort of easy home game, but I'm not sure if he's going to be, if he starts, I'll be unhappy, but I think Jota would maybe come in the right wing next week.
That's possible, yeah.
But the good thing with James Forrest is we've seen what we've seen last season. It's that calmness on the ball. It's the intelligent runs, sort of the unselfish runs he makes, so that Alistair Johnston has the runs. I think it helps. It helps Engels having somebody in there that's got a bit of experience. It helps Engels in there having somebody with a bit of experience around there, and he's
sorry, was that racist? Am I going to have to issue an apology after that?
Well, you better. You didn't mumble it, so I didn't just clarify what you said in case people don't hear that at all.
So it's all that maple syrup.
There you go,
Alistair. But I think the James Forrest coming in has been really good for him and Celtic. He needs that goal, but I'm not sure he's going to be the man going forward. But seeing him in this sort of role now, I never expected it from him. I always thought James Forrest was a sort of one-trick pony, but he had that. He was very good at it. I didn't see, because of the way he played, you thought by the time he gets to 30, if he loses a bit of pace, he's basically done.
Yeah.
But he's came in and he's trying to think of a winger like it, like Joaquin, obviously, from Betis, he's got into his 40s playing it, and that's not because he's still fast as anything, it's because he's game intelligence. And James Forrest came in and he just passes the ball, moves, doesn't try to do anything he knows he can't do anymore, and it's just that sort of game intelligence he's brought onto his game that I never thought he'd do. It's been brilliant. He sort of plays like that Thomas Muller, maybe, that occupies the space and then pops the ball off. You called him the best winger at the club and he's played 60 minutes in it this year.
It's not my fault, that's KUHN's fault, and that's what I'm about to come on to. What does it say about KUHN?
Brendan Rodgers said exactly that last year as well. Didn't he say he's still the best young winger at the club? See on the hold on, I'm not just okay. On you go. This is specifically just on something Melly said. It's he hasn't lost it entirely, his speed, because he is still very capable. On the odd occasion where in recent games he's been brought on the left side, he is capable of just buying that extra half yard, is the kind of cliche, right? But that extra just nudge away from a defender and getting a nice, one of those nicely hung crosses in the box.
Him and Jota are both good at that.
Yeah, he's still very, very adept at that. So it's not like he is completely lost, or a combination of lost or abandoned the ability to take players on and just get to the touchline. He's still definitely good at that. So all round, he is a very, very intelligent player whose use of the ball is something that we don't see in other players. As I say, it's just a shame it's all coming together for him at approaching 34 or whatever he is now.
And once again, I think he deserves enormous credit for...
I thought you were going to say another contract.
He deserves enormous credit for keeping himself fit, keeping himself game ready, coming back from an injury at that age, and once again the manager going, right, James, I need you to go. I need you to bail us out here because he's useless. And then you've got KUHN sitting in the corner looking sheepish. But what does it say about KUHN? Because Brendan Rodgers was obviously looking for a reaction here. If you look at the tail of the last 4 or 5 fixtures for Nicholas KUHN, it's been hooked at half-time against Rangers, given a reprieve against Hearts, hooked at half-time again, and then completely dropped in for James Forrest in this game. You says Brendan Rodgers went back to a team from last season. Is this about trust? Is this where Brendan's maybe looking at KUHN and going, do you know what? These games are all but dead rubbers, but I need a performance, and I can't trust you right now to give me one.
Yeah, maybe, possibly, but he's trusted him to go and play in the not quarterfinals, but the last 32 in the Champions League away from home. He's done the business there. No, the best performance. So he's played him in pretty much all the big games he's available for.
That's the story of KUHN, though, isn't it? The story with Nicholas KUHN is he played well up until that point, and he's not played well since.
Aye, but it's more maybe a lesson for him rather than trust that, look, you can't just decide, pick and choose when you do it, because that's, if you look at Nicholas KUHN's career, He's got to a certain point, he's left a big club. He's got to another certain point, he's left a club, and he's worked his way until he's up at Celtic now, and he's been doing brilliant, getting plaudits, on for Player of the Year, and then it's dropped off, so much so that he's lost his place. So managers maybe just said to him, look, I said it last week, there should be consequences to those performances, and he's not really seen that. He's always played the next game when he's had a bad game. Well, now he's not, and a guy's come in and performed well. You need to get back, win your place back, and that's the problem for him.
I think that just on what that signifies, and taking us back to the original point about the standards that weren't being met over the last couple of months, I think it has been a tricky season for that, because there are a lot of people who are keen to make the excuse for Celtic, with reason, that it just hasn't been as intense as in previous seasons, and we have seen that drop off. And you said, Jamie, earlier, it's obvious that Celtic can play like that, and you're left kind of scratching your head thinking, why can't you play like that all the time? It's not always as simple as that, and I know that's not what you were saying, but there is a natural kind of ebb and flow to football. It's just that the Celtic dropped way below the
Too
standard.
much ebbing.
Yeah, far too much ebbing, nowhere near enough flow. That's it exactly. And I think that's kind of embodied quite well by KUHN. He has dropped below. It's not just form; he's dropped below at a level that is acceptable, and we thought that there should be consequences to that. It's kind of like, it's that old cliche as well about how, you know, when a team really clicks into gear and finds an extra spark for the last 10 minutes of a game, why couldn't you play like that the entire game? Sometimes doesn't work like that. It takes some sort of fresh impetus to kick a team on like that, and that's all really this week has been about. Brendan Rodgers just, I assume, I'm not party to anything that happens behind the scenes, but sitting everyone down and saying, look, I'm really unhappy at the way you've been playing, particularly you, Nicholas. but it really, it's encouraging to see that the level has raised back up, albeit temporarily against a poor Kilmarnock team. But talking about KUHN and Forrest, I actually wouldn't be all that surprised to see KUHN straight back in the team for the semi-final either. So I hope that it was a wake-up call to him, and he seemed all right. I saw him kind of walking, he was on the pitch after the game, and the footage of it, he was just kind of laughing and joking with everyone. It doesn't seem like he's in a huff or anything like that. I think it was just a case of, like, hopefully the players have just taken it as a message received and we can all kick on.
Jota's sitting there thinking, what have I done? How did I get dropped for this?
I just sometimes wonder what Brendan Rodgers feels about it, because what is at stake for players and managers when the league is pretty much won? You're coming to the tail end of the season. I can understand the mindset where some players might just think, okay, cool, that's job done. We're just basically waiting till the inevitable happens. Inevitable in the game, i.e. someone's going to score for us. Inevitable in the league, i.e. someone's going to slip up, or we'll eventually get the win. But there's a pride, isn't there, Stephen, for the manager? But we don't get invited to press conferences really anymore. But if I was one thing I would have asked Brendan Rodgers in the last couple of weeks, is he made a comment earlier in the season. Twice now it's come up. Once against Chelsea, I think, or rather, maybe it's only come up once, when Chelsea or Man U pre-season, someone says, oh, that's a Brendan Rodgers team. And Brendan Rodgers remarked on that. And I would love to ask Brendan, has it been feeling like a Brendan Rodgers team the last couple of weeks? And I think maybe the answer probably would have been no. And I think that's where this comes from Brendan. Like, his pride is, he doesn't want to be seen as the manager whose team just fucking hand in crap towards the end of the season and stumble across the league, and we as fans expect a lot more than that. So it's a kind of he's making these changes even though really in terms of competition he doesn't have to, but he's doing it out of a sense of professional pride, about a sense of, this is, as you say, this is not good enough. Like, we really need to improve what we're doing here. It doesn't matter if it's game 35 or game 5, we really need to improve our showing on the pitch.
Yeah, and even if it is, there are a lot of ways to look at that, and one of them is, even from a selfish perspective, for Brendan Rodgers' reputation and his pride as a coach, that still matters. It still matters to be winning in style, because something else I said last week was that you don't want to start to give the impression that this is easy. You don't want to start to even suggest to the fans, the media, any observer outside, I know it's not really about what people think, but even the fans who are turning up to these games and leaving after 75 minutes, much to everyone's fury.
What do you think about that? Let's sidebar, because there's been a lot of discourse about that, about early leavers.
I saw some of the usual suspects were getting in the act, not just random tweeters, but the usual balls in Celtic, rather Scottish mainstream media.
I don't know if I brought it up last week, but in my rant about the players half-arsing it, it is dead easy to be quite pious about it, about, you should be pushing to the last minute, whilst I'm like tweeting that as I'm walking out of the Hearts game with 10 minutes to go because it's pissing down. Do you know what I mean? It's the easiest thing that we're able to by the way, I wasn't literally doing that. I'm just saying it's quite easy as a fan to criticise the players when you're leaving with 15 or 20 minutes to go. Would you make of the early leavers hanging too good for them, or do you think, you know what, it's your money, go do what you want?
Absolute disgrace, and they're not welcome back, and somebody else will take their ticket. No, but nah, I'll be totally blunt about it. In general, I don't care about it at all. I'm very much in the camp that do what you like. Not really in the you pay your money, you get to do what you want. I mean, to an extent, that's absolutely true, but I'm really not bothered. And cards on the table, being fully frank about it, I do take a look around at people leaving long before me and think, traffic's going to be much better on the way up the road. Thanks, folks. But I do take the point, though, that when you compare it to, I mean, tediously people like to compare it to, and as I say, one of the usual balls was saying, but look at Newcastle, they're still there singing after the final whistle, and I mean, they just won their first trophy in 70 years or whatever it was, a fortnight ago. There's a very good feeling about them just now, whereas, as we discussed at length last week, there has been a bit of a popping of the balloon around Celtic. So there's also that twice now in the last 3 or 4 weeks or whatever it was, Celtic have blown teams away in the first half and then just basically taken the second half off.
Well, that's what I was going to say.
I do appreciate if people are kind of like, well, I've gotten all I'm going to get from this particular experience, so it's a nice day, I'm going to go and do something else. Again, I'm not judging anyone. I genuinely don't care what it is you want to do. I think it's I don't know. I just can't find it within myself to criticise anyone for just doing what they like with their own choices.
I kind of, there's two camps for me. If Celtic are drawing 1-1 and the team are busting a gut to get a goal, you're not wanting people to walk out the stadium.
No,
do you know what I mean? Because if the players look up and they start to see that, it's like a lack of faith in the team, and maybe that rubs off on them. We've been told a million times that rubs off on them. So I do get that. If it's a particularly important game, say a Glasgow derby, this never happens, but Celtic are 3-0 up, they've blown the opposition away over 90 minutes, you think, right, I'm going to stay and applaud them off the pitch because they deserve that. As you say, if people want to leave when Celtic are 4-0 up at half time, and like you see, if you're getting nothing in the second half, it's kind of like the game was won, and we've seen that so many times this season, I'm not going to dig people up for leaving a fraction early if that suits them a wee bit. I know people get very pious about it online and all that, but I think that's just the online nature of things. I struggle to care. Close games where the players have put in extra effort, because they do the wee lap of honour, whatever it is, round the pitch, and you get to cheer them. But Melly looking at did you look at me bumping the bookshelf there in case it collapsed, in case it fell down on top of us? Nervously looked in. But Melly, leaving early.
It's fine. Like, everybody's got their own circumstances, don't they? The game was a 12:30 kick-off at the weekend, so that brings other dimensions to it. If it's 5 o'clock, people need to get up the road for dinner. Maybe they...
Come on! Stop
the road for dinner.
You're trying... Oh my! You're a politician. You're trying desperately not to have
up the road for dinner, up the road for mass, anything you want. But there's different reasons. People
suck it up.
There are different reasons, including good ones. None of them listed here, but there are good ones.
Get your scranning. But there's certain people that
you should be supporting the club with their £12 pies. That's
the road for chicken nuggets and chips.
Saturday night scran. There's different reasons for people to go in there. And like you say, it's not as if people are bailing out when it's 2-1 or 1-0. It's usually when the game's comprehensively won and people have just got other things on, or families up the road. It's fine. People might have illness and it's easier for them
Travel's
not walking through a busy bit and that. So no problem with it. It maybe becomes a problem if people are just like under Ronnie Dyler, people would leave early all the time, but that's because the performance in the pitch is terrible and you're not seeing what you want to see and they've lost faith in the team. But it's nothing like that. The job's done. People want to go up the road. Fine, scran time.
Up the road for your dinner. How about that? Stephen, look, is playing... I'm going to be a real downer here, right? Feel free to tell me, but right. But we're all saying, "Oh, that was much better," but it was only for half. It was only for half the game. Is that? What is that? Is that a C plus? Is that what you want to see from Celtic? Do you want to see Celtic continue into the last kick of the ball?
Well, it's an upturn from 0 halves, which is what we got against
Correct.
St Johnstone.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm no statistician, but 1 half is significantly better than 0 halves. Check the record on that, bud. So I take that point as well, but I suppose there is a certain element of that. It's kind of that this is the deal we've made. There's something very Brendan Rodgers about that, about blowing teams away and then controlling for the rest. Again, it's not every single game, but there are circumstances that come up where you do have the opportunity to take not like specifically take the foot off the gas and just coast for a half, but sometimes the second half does become about conserving energy and controlling the game and making sure that everyone comes off the pitch in good health and recovery. And
Kilmarnock changed it up as well. They decided we're not taking a tanking here.
Aye.
Goal difference is important to them in the bottom half of the table. So they just had to shut up shop because it could not have went any worse for them. They got a bit of a fluke goal, but they were getting ripped to shreds out there.
Goal difference is massive at the top end of the table as well. We are only 42 goals ahead of our nearest rivals.
Yeah, no, we need to keep
Every
this
goal
up.
counts. So there's no excuses for taking the foot off the gas. But yeah, I know what you mean. But I think it is. I think the two things are connected. I think people can sense when it's not going to get any better from this point on. We've seen an exhilarating first half, second half not so much. And again, I'm not saying like everyone should be just total mass exodus after 65 minutes or anything like that. But I do think like if people have derived as much enjoyment as possible from this game, that they're free to leave. And Celtic, I suppose, have probably contributed to that by just easing off ever so slightly. Kilmarnock, I think that's a good point to make. I think like once a team senses an absolute pasting in the air here, I think they will double down. And I think Derek McInnes said that after the game. He said they defended better in the second half, and I think that's probably for the best for their own pride there. But I do take the point that it's not the 90-minute domination that we've been crying out for, because I think had it been 90 minutes of what we saw in the first 20, 25 or whatever, it would have been silly. And it might even have gotten to that point where we've spoken about before, where you get to that point of diminishing returns where the more goals that go in, the more criticism is aimed at Celtic for it being too easy in the league. So maybe 4-1 was the ideal.
Come, Mr. Reader, you derive just as much pleasure from 16 minutes of football than I do. or does he, Melly? Adam, he does 60 minutes.
I thought he was good on Saturday. He's I don't want to say an enigma, because we've seen from him what he can do last season. We just haven't seen enough from him. But I do think Celtic play better with him in the team.
Yeah.
Having him, Forrest and Maeda up there is very direct. They get the ball, they use it well, and they've got that pace and that power. And he's somebody else where, was it the second goal where Celtic get it from defence into him, he lays it off, a couple of passes, and then the ball's in the back of the net. We don't really have other strikers that do that. I do think against teams like Kilmarnock that are just going to be big, brutal defenders, that there was a back five of them there at the weekend. So I think Adam Maeda's a good instrument in that. It's just he's no scoring goals, but I think the rest of his all-round play is good. But we've seen this early in the season with him, with Kyogo, that the strikers weren't scoring goals. Celtic were winning games, they were scoring lots of goals, and other players were scoring. So if Celtic are getting convincing victories, do we need our strikers to score? Brendan Rodgers is always speaking about, look, it's the...
Kyogo had a similar problem.
Yeah, he did. Playing the space, not the position, and that's what Adam Maeda does. I do want to see him in between the posts more, but he scored 4 goals with him on the pitch, and he's involved in it. He brings a lot more other players into the game with his all-round play. So I would like him to score more goals, but his all-round play was really good. And I kind of, if I'm looking towards next season, what do I want if Celtic go out and get a striker? Well, I want Adam Maeda, but I just want a guy that scores more goals.
Yeah, it's a really strange one, because part of me just thinks, well, this is what we've bought. He was never a prolific goal scorer really anywhere he's been, chiefly at Norwich, of course, but I just don't think he's ever scored a lot of goals. This is the most prolific season of his entire career.
Do you think it's something they can do, but because it's not finishing that's the problem? He's not fluffing chances.
Yeah.
No.
Maybe it's just Brendan Rodgers and the coaching staff working with him. Right, you've laid the ball off here. you need to be in between the posts quicker now, or
Yeah.
just working on movement or something.
I think that's a good point, because there's nothing, just because in the past he hasn't scored X amount of goals, he has only scored Y amount of goals, doesn't mean he's stuck on that total forever, because prior to joining Celtic, Maeda never scored more than 30 goals. Kyogo never scored 34 in his career either. So it is possible to add goals to his game, depending on coaching and the use of a player in the game. So it is possible he might score goals. I just wonder if what we're seeing just now is not the absolute limit of him, but I just don't know if he's ever going to score a huge amount of goals, because you watch him play and he's not really in the right positions. You mentioned it there, be between the goalposts. It's the biggest, not quite cliche, but it's the thing said about strikers the most. That's where you get your chances, and it's where managers tell your strikers to pick up, not just stand like a post in between the posts. That's a bit odd.
He's raging, but he's like, Daizen Maeda just stood there and the ball fell to him.
I do think there's an agility thing with Adam Maeda. As you see, he's really good at coming short for the ball. Then the ball goes out wide, or it comes back and it's moving across, and then he's no fluffing chances, but he's also not, the ball's not dropping to him in the box like Kyogo's. A lot of Kyogo's goals, when I'm thinking back in my head, does that wee drop with the shoulder, doesn't he? Makes a wee bit of space for himself and sticks one in the back of the net.
Yeah.
But a lot of Adam Maeda's goals for Celtic a lot of his goals, especially last season, it was backs to the wall, it was digging his out, his ball's going into the box, he's fighting his way through packed boxes and heading it, or he's picking up spills from Butland because he's leading the line, or even against
Aston. Just wanted to mention that.
I did. Or even against Aston Villa, he's battling against big centre halves with lots of space in front of him. He's still really getting that, because we're squeezing teams, aren't we? We're squeezing teams deep into their own half. He's sort of playing a midfield role. By the time he turns it into the box, he's running into 10 or 11 defenders. And a lot of our goals at the weekend were either absolute wonder strikes or Daizen sticking them in at the back post. And he's not a wonder strike guy, and he's not a creeping in at the back post, because he'll never get all the way round there, and that's Daizen space anyway. So I said this a couple of weeks ago, I think he's just, as far as his goal tally goes, I just think he's unlucky. I just think it's the way Celtic play. And I'm reminded of the struggles Kyogo had, and Brendan Rodgers did say that. He goes, I don't need my strikers to score 30, 40 goals a season. I just need them to be playing the position where I need them to be and doing what I ask them to do.
He's quite an odd player to try and get a handle of in terms of the perception of him. I don't mean on the pitch. I think watching him and trying to work out what it is exactly he is quite tricky, because of course, if Celtic are up against it, home or away, whatever it is, if Celtic are up against it, chasing a goal, I'm sure there'll be a lot of people, maybe even including me, who would think you need to get Adam Maeda in there to try and win headers in the box. It's not really something you see a huge amount of him. I think in terms of his hold-up play, he's very good, as you've already mentioned, at linking players and bringing other players into it. But a lot of the times, the ball doesn't really stick to him either. See, when he's the focal point, the furthest player forward, sometimes that's when his touch, the ball breaks off him a little bit and it doesn't hold it in. But when he drops deep, that's when he's able to turn and open up other channels and bring other players into it. I don't know if he's ever going to be a prolific striker, but this is all good stuff. This is all very, very useful. It's just that with him being the centre forward, there's always going to be a focus on getting goals. But
Hugh Keevins.
Yeah, the Hugh Keevins 20.
He needs to hit a Keevins,
as we say. But there's just out of pure curiosity, I looked into his season today, and the Kilmarnock game was the 8th time that IDAH has started a game that Celtic have scored 3 or more goals, but he hasn't scored any of them.
Is that good or bad?
Well, that is a very selective framing of it, because there are plenty of games. Bratislava, Falkirk, I think Dundee was like 6-0. There are plenty of games that he has scored in, but the reason I framed it at that is because it doesn't have to be him that's putting the ball over the line into the net. He, for whatever reason, brings out goal-scoring performances in Celtic, the way he links up play and brings other players into it. So he's a curious player. There's something in there. I know he's a little bit rough around the edges, but I think as we've already spoken about, it's not that he's like really young and likely to get much, much better. But Kyogo, Daizen, these guys are all having the best goal scoring seasons of their career, well into their late 20s. It's not too late for them.
Even into their Celtic careers, we've not had a lot of players that have came in the last few years that have came in and just been instantly absolutely brilliant. KUHN's taken a while to get into it. Matt O'Reilly took a while. Hatate had a good start, then dropped off. Daizen Maeda, we weren't sure about him, and now he's the best player at the club. So a lot of these players we maybe take into the second season or a wee bit later on for them to really form into Celtic players.
I don't even know if we'd be having this conversation if he only cost £4 million.
Yes,
I think a lot of it is, a lot of the focus on Maeda just now is because, one, we saw Kyogo and everyone expected him to step into those shoes, and in a sense, with his link-up play and all that we saw, he kind of has. It's just the goal tally that hasn't followed up, but we're getting those goals from elsewhere. The team hasn't suffered. And the other thing is, it's not his fault that Celtic messed about in the transfer market for so long that we had to, it was him or nothing. And when you're in that position,
Norwich saw us coming.
Norwich saw us coming. But if we got him on loan, £4 or £5 million option to buy, we picked him up at the end of the season, people will be saying, look, that young player, great big young player, Republic of Ireland internationals, contributed plenty when he's came in, bailed us out in big games and plays all right. But I think he's got a touch of the Marc-Antoine Fortuny about him, the non-goal scoring forward type thing. And, if I'm playing both sides, but that kind of doesn't really fly at Celtic. People don't have an awful lot of patience still, even these days, for a non-scoring striker. It's a difficult sell, that one, isn't it?
It's tough, but then you look back, he scored twice against Rangers, he scored in the Champions League, 3 goals?
Yep.
He's got goals in the Cup. It's big goals he's got in big games. So it's not as if he's like, we're looking at him going, he's a flat track bully or anything like that. It's probably the opposite to that. He doesn't do it.
He only scores in big games.
It's the smaller teams he doesn't do it against.
Speaking of goals, though, what was your pick? Cameron Carter-Vickers shank. Fair play to him coming out and saying he didn't mean it. I think he's been too humble there because
he's lying.
I know. I don't know what he means by
it.
I don't know what he means by didn't mean it, because he hit a very hard placed shot towards the goal and it went in the back of the net. Unless what he's saying is it was so bad. Unless what he's saying is I meant to ping a curved ball out to Daizen Maeda and I hit it so badly it ended up in the back of the net. And that I could maybe accept that, but I just don't believe him that it was a shank. Just give him goal of the season. Just hilarious.
It's one of those ones where as soon as it hits your foot, it hits his foot, leaves his foot even, you're sort of up off your seat. And even when in the stadium, it's one of those goals where you see the players' reaction, but when you see the replays, the crowd gets another whoa when they see it. It was an absolute brilliant strike, even after Rio Hatate's great one.
Yeah.
And there's no way he's not trying to do what he done there. He done it. He's probably just trying to downplay it a bit, but it was a sweet strike. Kind of nose far out and a wee bit different, but it reminded me of Kieran Tierney's one against Kilmarnock, where you're just going, he's shot, whoa, and then back of the net. It's just the way it curves away from the keeper. And when you see it from the angle behind him, he's lining up for the shot. He just catches it so perfectly that he's maybe thought, I didn't ever think I would catch it that well, so I can't claim that I meant that. But absolute screamer, contender.
It wasn't even like laces through it. It was like the instep. So I think it was like he was taking a penalty from 35 yards. It was like a full follow through into it and everything, full feet off the ground. There's no way that was a miss hit. Although having said that, it's funny that it's the same player that produced the most gifable moment from a couple of seasons ago when he hit a shot and said these wee kind of looked to him and said, well, that was some effort, big man. That would Trundler kind of past the post.
Because Engels had the one, didn't he, that he absolutely shanked miles away.
That's right. That was after the one he'd dropped onto the bar. What a goal it was for Cameron Carter-Vickers, but it looked as if it was like still rising when it hit the back of the net. All of the goals were very, very pleasing, though. After again,
Tony Boys was pleasing for me.
Oh yeah, of course. Well, if you don't know, his gets a bit of a windfall every time Tony bags one.
When Tony starts, I put a fiver on him to score any time. When he comes on as a sub, I put a fiver on him to score any time.
How much did you get back?
Some weird reason it was 66-1 at the weekend. So you do the math.
And he's been doing this since Tony Ralston was 17. So the man's on the street.
335 quid?
Yes.
Wow.
Not bad.
I know, not bad. Still £700 down. How could you bet?
Came in 4 times this season.
Every season.
But yeah, very, very pleasing goals, especially after what we've been subjected to in the last few weeks of very, very disappointing performances. It's by no means the best goal, so I would never even suggest this, but there was something actually very satisfying about Daizen's goal, because See, when the move was brilliant, and when Johnston gets to it's not quite the goal line, but when he fizzes it across, that's exactly what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to cause havoc. The corridor of uncertainty, just ping it straight in there. But there's a lot of sauce on that. And in some ways, it was probably going to be quite a difficult chance to take when it arrives at Daizen because there's so much behind it. And then the defender somehow manages to not score an own goal at almost point blank range, and all he does is kill it stone dead into the path of the most deadly player in the entire country. And seeing Daizen's face, can't read his mind, but there was something about his face that almost suggested this season, man, tap. It just knocked it in, the easiest chance you'll have all season, and it was because of a hapless defender lying at his feet. So brilliant goal.
You want to finish on some VAR bollocks?
Oh,
right, aye.
Listen, we're not buying it for a minute. We don't have the technology to make these really tight offside calls. They don't exist because what happens is, I think you've got 3 or 4 frames to pick from, and the lines kind of don't add up anyway. And I think they just pick whatever frame he's offside. Because
this is Daizen's second goal. IDAH makes the run, yeah.
So when it's so marginal, a player can be offside in one frame and then onside in the other. But the picture of the ball is 3 frames. So you've got the kick, and then there's...
It's already leaving his foot when the lines are drawn.
It's already leaving his foot when the lines are drawn. But you'll have 3 very... So I don't buy it. We have purposefully tried to not do too much on VAR this season because it was a shambles last season. But I think it's another one they've guessed, and we've already had that this season. And I think we very specifically when it comes to these offside calls, Melly, the very close marginal ones, you either have to implement. You know how they started using like AI, didn't they?
It's semi-automated. Kieran Tierney got done with it at the weekend.
In the English Premier League, that is.
And it's clear as day. When they show you the replay, you can see which part of the person's body, because they do the shadow over it, is ahead. Us will get those lines even straight.
So you get the line coming from like the shoulder of one player, but it comes from the shirt of another player. Something. The whole thing's a mess.
It would be fine. Well, it wouldn't be fine, right? But what I mean is that you have to kind of make a decision. Either has to be full VAR, full fat VAR we've got, right? That none of this sort of diet stuff we've got, or you have to admit that there are shortcomings in the technology, and you just leave it up to on-field decisions. Those are really the 2 decisions to be made that I can see.
That's not clear and obvious either. No, it's not clear.
There might be huge variation in between, but those, as far as I can tell, are the 2 decisions. You either go invest properly in this technology, or admit that it can't do things. And in that case, when you're looking at the footage and you can't decide what's happening, you can't just make it up. You have to say, well, the ref called this at the time, so we're better sticking with that than just making it up. Because that, not to drag us too far back into it, but that one on the goal line from Alistair Johnston's cross a few weeks ago that we spoke about, it was a total punt, total guess. Yep. And instead of saying, we don't have the footage for this, we've watched it at multiple angles and we don't have the footage to definitively tell, we're going to just need to go back to the on-field decision because we can't intervene here. Instead of doing that, they're just going to go, or we're in a bit of a bind here, just pull a decision at our asses. So that's the most dissatisfying use of it, is when it's just a total guess. It's not that goal itself didn't cost Celtic anything at the weekend, but again, I think it was fairly clear from the ropey footage we got. It's just a total punt. Yeah.
It has, because it's another goal. Daizen Maeda has been taken. There's about 4 or 5 this season that have been taken off that guy. He'd be well on the way to 40.
That's actually very true. I mean, it's cost all these poor decisions have already cost someone their job. I think Alan Muir was let go from the VAR room.
Shame.
And on that bombshell, we shall wrap up. Thanks so much to everyone who joined us. Thank you so much if you support us on Patreon. If you want to do that, patreon.com/20minute Tims for extra podcasts, videos and writing. And we'll be back very soon.